Hello and welcome to Discover Dorico in November 2024. If you're watching the previous session, you'll realise I've said that once before and I was wrong. That was a 2nd October session. Anyway, in today's session, I hope you'll make giant steps in your knowledge of creating lead sheets, including using chord symbols. I'll be using Dorico Pro 5, but for much of this session you could also use Dorico Elements SE or Dorico for iPad, or of course any files that are created but maybe by you in Dorico Pro 5 could be used by others if you're making templates for them to use in other versions of Dorico. So if you want to follow along as we go along, then please do. You may find a colleague or two monitoring the live chat, and I'll also be keeping an eye on it. So if you have questions, please put them in there. If there are things that we don't get to today, because actually this can be quite a large topic and there's quite a lot to get through, then please make note of the email address discoverdorico@steinberg.de. So Discover Dorico is all one word, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and then I can answer those maybe with some specific questions that you've got. Send me your example files, let's have a look and answer your questions. There will also be some links in the description below this video later, so if there are things that I've talked about and other websites and things, then let me know, and I'll put those links underneath in the description as we go along. Sorry, I'll put them in the chat as we go along. I'll put them in the description afterwards, and we can go from there. If you want to come back and watch this session again, it will always be available on this same URL link. You can pause, rewind, or come back and catch up at any time. After the session, I'll add the chapter links as well, so you can skip to specific sections. If they aren't there yet, then you're watching live, so come back later. And don't forget, on YouTube, you can click on the cog for settings such as the playback speed, so you can speed me up or slow me down, as well as using the arrow keys or the shortcuts K to pause, J to go back a few seconds, and L to skip forward. Also, please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified of other videos and live streams that we do. So, how is the audio so far? It must be working because Stephen's already groaned at the giant steps quote. Actually, I'm not doing giant steps today, but you know, why not? So hopefully audio's okay. Shall we? Let's get going. I'm going to start a new lead sheet from the beginning, add all sorts of things, and there's all sorts of items that you'd want to change from the standard setup in Dorico. So I'll look at lots and lots of those items, including chord symbols, including guitar frames, but there is also a session that we're going to do on guitar notation, including tab and note input, and including guitar frames and things like that, and capos and things that we'll do in the next session. So we'll only do some of those in the session today. So if you want to follow along, we're going to kind of create a lead sheet from here, and then you should be able to hopefully find all the steps. If I'm too fast, just press pause, come back to it in a bit. So what we're going to do is I thought recently, I'm sure as many people have been doing, you've been re-listening to Quincy Jones' back catalogue. So I thought maybe we'd do Misty today, the Sarah Vaughan arrangement. I'm not obviously doing the whole arrangement, we'll just do a lead sheet of it, but I thought that might be a good reference. So if you're starting on the Steinberg hub, as you can hopefully see on the screen now, let me just check all of those working. Yes, there we go. So if you're starting from the Steinberg hub, then mine is set to paper size A4. Yours may well be set to letter, depending on the location of you and your computer and where it's from. I've got the standard settings here for the international size. As I said, yours might be slightly different. And then from the solo section, I'm just going to use lead sheet as a start, and then I'm going to explain why sometimes you don't want to do that, and why you might want to create your own template or your own settings or your own instruments and that kind of thing. But this is a good place to start. So I'll click Create Project, and we'll go from here. So you can see I've been doing a few projects today because mine's on Title Project 5, but that's fine. So I'm going to start, as you probably normally would. You'll kind of go, oh great, we'll jump in setup mode. It's got a voice. We'll look at changing that later, and you'll probably instantly jump into doing some note input. So let's do a quick bit of that just to get that bit out of the way, and then we can go from there. So I'm not going to cover all of the exact steps and everything else that I'm doing. I'll try and cover a load of them as we go. So let me make sure things like my keyboard shortcuts are on. So you can see there's a little keyboard shortcut displaying at the bottom of the screen. So I'll leave those on for a bit. So Shift K, and I'm going to put this in E flat. I know the Sarah Vaughan version I think was in C, but the lead sheet, if you've got the real book, I think I probably prefer the original Real Book one, but you might have one of the other ones. Well, I'm going to use that one as my kind of basis for this. Now, let's say we presume that we didn't know what we were doing, or we didn't not know what we were doing, but we didn't realise we needed an upbeat. So let's say we'll start this on beat 4. So I've just used the arrow keys to get there, and then I have a MIDI keyboard attached, so I can enter notes like this and double tap 7 for a dotted note. And I'm going to use this method just for a minute. And now I've already gone wrong, haven't I? Sorry. Oh, it's the problem of doing it live. If I put insert mode on, press I, delete that note. There we go. Sorry, that wasn't intentional, but there we go. So I then want some triplets. I suppose if you don't like entering triplets as you go, then you can do it this way, and you could use insert mode. So if you put the notes in first, you can then select these 3 notes. You can press I for insert mode. You can then press the semicolon button and it will guess what your triplet is, and you can select these. Sorry if I'm going a bit quick. There's a whole set of videos on note input if you want to follow those ones for more exact information, but I'm using semicolon for the triplets. I'll do some others in a different way so that you've got those as well. Press I to turn off insert mode for a minute and carry on. Now this one, I need this to tie into the triplets, so I'm going to choose 5 for 8th notes. I'm going to enter a triplet this way. I'm going to press enter to turn the caret off. I'm going to press T to tie these together, and then going to select all of these notes, and I'm just going to press R to repeat them, and then press the down arrow because that will give me what I need for those, and I can move into the next bar. Now I've forgotten where I am. Oh yes. So I'm changing to quarter note, and I'm pressing the triplet button, so semicolon 3, and then turn the triplets off. Don't forget that, otherwise it'd be a bit of a pain. I'm going to press breathe or double whole note, and then I'm going to use Alt Shift and left arrow just to shorten that. It's shortening along the rhythm grid, so that my rhythm grid is on 8th notes, so I have to press the arrow key twice. It's just a quicker way of entering those notes. And then there will be a repeat here, but for now I'm just going to carry on entering the notes that I need. So this is effectively going to be the second time bar in a minute. We'll create that in a minute. Oh, I forgot to put the rest in. Oh dear, I thought I pressed the rest. Obviously not, I pressed the space bar, there we go. No, I definitely have. Where are we going? I will make this quick. So I'm going to press 8 to give me a note that's about as long as I need, and then shorten it, although it turns out that I've actually got this wrong again because I'm trying to do this and talk all at the same time. So I've got all of this wrong. Look, I've managed to hit a wrong shortcut for that. I've also managed to add in too many notes here, so insert mode on again, delete that, there we go. So this note is supposed to be this long, so I'm using Alt Shift and the arrow keys to lengthen and shorten those notes. Sorry, I was aiming for this to be quick, and I keep making errors instead, so apologies. And then we want to do this. Maybe if I stop talking at the same time. Is anybody in the comments saying shut up and just get on with it? And then nearly done. I hope you all know this tune. If not, what are you doing in this session? Oh, look, I've done it again. I forgot to turn the triplets off. There we go. Turn the triplets off, and then do that. I suppose I could have deleted it afterwards, couldn't I? Yes, okay. I could have deleted it afterwards, but there we go. Now, I'm going to just say I want from here to here. So I'm just selecting that note, shift selecting that one. I'm going to alt-click at the beginning of this bar, because that will give me the rest of it up to here. But that only needs to be a whole note. And then these bars at the end I don't need, so I'm going to. You could select them, but you don't need to. You can just select one, and I want to delete 5 bars. So I'm just going to use Shift B and press -5.
So it'll delete 5 bars for me. There we go. Now this at the beginning here. Now we go. Oh, oops! We wanted this as an upbeat, didn't we? So this should be. I just pressed enter. I'm going to put at the end of that (1) to give me a 1 beat pickup. But now I've got too many beats, so I'm going to press Option T because I didn't have the system track turned on. You might have had this turned on by default. It's in the View menu in System Track. So when it's there, if you hold down the Alt or Option key, then you can select just a few beats here. And then when you let go, you get this little trash can. So if I click on that, it'll delete them. There we go. So I can press Option or Alt T now and turn the system track off. And I also don't want this little signpost. So go to View Signposts, or if you've set a shortcut, use your shortcut to turn the signpost off for now. So there's the first bit. We need to put the repeats and things in again. Hey, Misty. This isn't for beginners. Well, it is sort of for beginners, but we've done some of the note input stuff before, so I didn't want to take too long over it. As I said, you can press pause if you want some of these. There's a whole set of note input videos. I'll link them underneath later, but if you want, let me just find the resources page. If you go to, I'll put in the chat now, blog.dorico.com. Oops. There you go. So there's a shortcut to the resources page, and on there you can link to the first steps guide, which has a lot of basic note input things. There's some note input videos from Ant as well on there. So if you want to know a lot more detail about those kind of things, then have a look at that one. So we're going to go from here. Now, there's all sorts of things that you'll want to change for a lead sheet, and that you'll want to include and you'll want to add and do. So the first thing is that I think, let's say we're going to put the repeats in here. So this bit here should actually be the first time bar. So I'm just going to press Shift R for the repeats popover, and I'm going to type end, and that's going to give me a first time ending here. Now, I've got by default on my system winged bar lines turned on, winged repeats. If you don't have those, then go to the library menu and engraving options. Now, whether you want these as a for everything or not, I don't know, but in bar lines, select, scroll down and select the option when you see the picture, there it is, for show wings. So this is probably the default, and I've got this one selected, and then you just press apply. If you want that for all new projects, which I tend to, well, apparently I've got set on this system anyway, then press save as default, and it will save that option so you don't have to do it again. However, we will talk about how to kind of make a template. So maybe you don't want it all the time, but you just want it in your lead sheet template. So maybe just add it into this file for now, and then at the end we'll look at how we can reuse some of these things as project templates. So that's the first bit there. Now there's also a start repeat bar line here. You could use the option over here on the right hand side, and you can use these options like start repeats here. But if you prefer to use a popover, you can use the Shift B popover for bar and bar lines, and you can type pipe and then colon, so it looks like a repeat bar line. So I'm using, in my keyboard, I'm using Shift and the backslash because that gives me pipe, and Shift semicolon gives me colon. So that gives me the repeat there as well. And if you needed other things like, if you needed other double bar lines, then you can do those as well. So in fact, there isn't one in this piece, but I'm just going to add one so you can see. So where we do need a double, I'll just do it here for now. So if you, for example, have a repeat bar line here at the beginning of the system, then you sometimes also might want a double bar line here, and you might not get that by default. So again, if you have a look in the bar lines section, you can turn the option on for, he says, here. So there's at the end of the previous system, coinciding with a repeat, then you get a double bar line. I think single is the default. So if you want a double, then choose that option as well. So engraving options in the library menu and bar lines, and then you can find that one. Again, you can just look for the pictures generally of a thing you want, and press close. So that would give you that option. Now I don't actually want one there, so I'm just going to, while it's selected, or if I select it, I can just press delete and it goes away again. I did want a double bar line somewhere. I want one here. So I'm going to press Shift B, and I'm just going to press pipe for a double bar line, and that will give me that one. And then if you want to add any others in, so I think we also probably want one here, so it's actually at the end over here. No, it's not there. Have I just added that one in the wrong place? I have, haven't I? Delete. That one should be there. and then there should be one here, because I think it's roughly, I think it's every 8 bars. I think it's a 32 bar, isn't it? So that's the first thing, is some bar lines, a bit of structure, a bit of repeats, those kind of things. We will talk about things like how we change the sounds and how we do various other things as we go on as well. But let's add some more things into here while we're here. So let's add in some chord symbols. There's multiple ways you can add chord symbols. So I'm going to press Shift Q for the chord symbols popover. In fact, let me just back up a second. One of the things we haven't talked about a lot, I don't think, recently, is that over here on the right-hand side, we have these 2 buttons at the top. This one is the panels. So when you click on these things, so for example, when I was clicking on bar lines, it opens this panel of all of the bar lines that I want to. When I click on it again, it goes away. There's another option here, which is the popovers. So now, because I've got a note selected, if I was to choose this option here, then it activates the popover. So you might think, well, I can do that with a shortcut. Fantastic, do that, use the shortcut. But also what this button does is it enables some extra options down here. So for example, there's now a chord symbols button, and there's a lyrics button and a text button, and some other things for figured bass and things like that down here. So all of these here don't normally appear when you're on this other option. My mouse has just stopped working. Bear with me a second. What was strange? That was very strange. So they don't normally appear when you're in this panels section. They appear here when you're in the popovers bit. So if you're wondering where these extra buttons are sometimes, or how you get to them with a mouse, then that's how you do it. But I'm just going to press Shift Q for chords instead. So Shift Q, and now I can type in a chord. So the first chord is an E flat major 7. So you can do it that way if you like. If I just delete that for a second, another option you can do. In fact, let's do a few actually. So I'll do E flat major 7. I'll do it this way. And when you press the space bar, I forgot the 7. Sorry, E flat major 7. And when I press the space bar, it's moving on to the next beat. There are other options that you can set as to where it's moving to, so I'll show you those in a second. But at the moment, the default is it's moving to the next beat. So I just press the space bar a few times, and now I can press B flat minor 7. Don't press minus, press minor 7, because minus isn't going to work. Why doesn't it work? I'd love it to work. Maybe one day. So B flat M7. There we go. Maybe you're displaying them as a minus, and we'll come on to display options in a minute. But you do need to type an M, and there you go, an E7, E flat 7. So you can type all of these in if you want to. What have we got? A flat major 7. And if that's that's maybe your preferred way of doing it, I don't know. I'm just going to select one of these. I'm going to use the Select More shortcut, which is Command Shift A, and delete them for a minute, and do an alternative method. So I'm going to press Shift Q, exactly the same as I did, but on my MIDI keyboard, I'm going to play in an E flat major 7, like that. It sounds like a voice, doesn't matter what it sounds like right now. And then I'm going to press the space bar to get to here, and then I can play another chord. So B flat minor 7, and then E flat 7. I shouldn't do this while I'm talking. There we go. So you can enter the chords that way. If you have a MIDI keyboard, you can just play the chord on your MIDI keyboard. If you don't get exactly what you wanted, there are some other options you can use. One of the things I would have a look at is in note input options. So library note input options. In here, for chord symbols, there are various options for things. So which things you would prefer to omit or add, whether inversions are considered, whether suspended seconds are seconds or ninths, or follow the context. Added ninths, added elevenths, diminished major sevenths. So there's various options here that you can use for various things, what you're doing with polychords or that kind of thing. So all of these have various options. In the MIDI input section, there's also options for whether or not chord symbol input is allowed via a MIDI keyboard or not. So don't click disallow if you want that. And what to do with some of the options as you're inputting them. This is the option for whether you advance during chord symbol input via the MIDI keyboard. So at the moment, it's just moving on to the next beat. Maybe you want it to go next bar. If you're literally doing chord in every bar, you can put it on next bar and you can just say chord, 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 chord on the MIDI keyboard and it will just automatically move on. Mine's on next beat at the moment because it gives me a bit more control over what I'm doing. So there's various options both in the MIDI input section and the chord symbol section if you're going to use a MIDI keyboard for that. There are also some things you can do as you're playing things in. So well, this isn't going to be the right chord at this point. If you're playing things in and you play something like, how is this going to work? Yeah, so this is giving me a B flat minor over G. I'm just going to press Command left because that's going to go back to my previous chord symbol. If I play exactly the same notes again, if I play the same notes again, but I play the bass note last, then it gives me a different option. So I played right hand, left hand, and then it gives me a different option than if I just play all the notes together. So you can get different options if you need to specify a bass note, and you can choose in the options how you want those things to work. You can do that, and it may be that you can change an inversion you wanted to play and that kind of thing as well. But there's all sorts of options for that for note input. So there's various different ways you can get the chords in. Now, to save me putting all the chords in and you watching me enter all the chords, hopefully that's enough of those. I'm just going to check the comments for a second. I think they're being answered hopefully by Daniel or somebody on the team. Is the MIDI keyboard octave independent? Yes. So the chords don't need to be played in root position, depending on the options that you have set in that dialogue. And also when Daniel says, yes, I'm here. Thank you. Also, when you're playing them in, these chords, if you want to hear them later, then Dorico will remember the inversion that you've played here. So if you've got your MIDI keyboard set too high, all your chords will sound a bit high when you play them back from this chord symbol. So that can be important when you play them in, that you get the right sound of the thing you wanted. If you want your chord symbols to play back, then when you go to the play section here, the play mode, there's a chords track up here. If I just go back, you can see the chords in it. Here we go. And if I click this little speaker icon, what happens now in Dorico is it will automatically assign playback to those. So it's automatically going to work out what should happen. So they're playing. If they're a bit loud, then in the mixer, either in the properties panel at the bottom, Command 8, Control 8, if you go to the mixer, or if you use the F3 floating mixer, which is this shortcut button up here, then the chords have their own fader as well, so you can turn them down. So now when you press play, so you get the inversion. So maybe that one was a bit high and I should have used a different one. But you'll hear the inversion that you played if that's the way you entered the chords. If you typed the chords in, then Dorico will play you a chord. It's likely to jump around a lot more, I think, because it won't know the context and everything else, but it will play you the right chords so that you've got the context of what you're doing. Yes, Lenny, we'll get there in a second. Alberto, yes, but you would need to move them manually. Well, hopefully we'll look at that later. Ask me later if we don't. But at the moment, we want the chord symbols above. Because we've got notes in these anyway. Now, I'm just going to cheat for a second because to save me entering all of the rest of the chords and everything else, I'm going to open this file, which hopefully is about the same place we were in. Here we go. But we have all of the chords. So that's good. And they're currently not playing back because I've unticked that little speaker icon because it was annoying for me if they're playing back all the time. So just turn it on when you want it. Turn it off again later. So I think I've got all the notes in. Yes, I've got all the chords and everything else. Okay, so let's look at a few chord options for things that you want to do. Actually, the first one, before I forget, it's going to annoy me. Down here, these two chords at the end are often kind of optional for a turnaround. I'm just going to put globally on because I want this to happen in score and parts, and we'll talk about that as well in a second. If I turn on parenthesized here, then I can parenthesize a chord, but I can show the parenthesis just at the start. And then on this one, I want to make it parenthesized and just show it at the end. And if I choose both of these, then I can also choose the parenthesis style. But in this case, I just want to change the scale, and I want to make it probably about 130% or something, just to make them a little bit bigger. So there are some options for showing those in brackets if you need to. There isn't yet an option to show kind of another row of chord symbols across the top for different chord changes, maybe one day. There are options if you need them for showing capo chords and that kind of thing, and also for guitar symbols, but don't let me get ahead of myself. Hang on a second. So we've sorted the pickup, yes. Now, one thing I would say is I'm working in the score. Often, don't work in the score. Because you might think I'm just doing a quick lead sheet, but what often happens is partway through you realise actually you need some other options. You need the same lead sheet in a different key. You need, or for a different instrument, or you need to add some other options, or when we look at cues later or something else. So I would, if possible, get into the habit of using the part, which then leads us into some of these other labels and questions. Now this is a treble staff now, not the lead sheet I had. So actually I've skipped ahead one section, so I'm just going to go back to here, because in the one you're following along it says voice, because we started with the lead sheet template. Now that means that the lead sheet template is started with a singer. So this is the vocal sound, which may be fine, maybe what you wanted. If that's not what you wanted, then in setup mode, actually the easiest option, you can go to play mode and just change the sound, but why not come into here, click on these little three dots and do a change instrument? Because if you change this, for example, if you type treble and choose treble staff, don't choose treble singer, they're still a singer, choose treble staff from the sketch family, then that would do an instrument change, which will change the labels potentially, but would also change the sound. So now this is going to sound like a piano. So if you needed a trumpet because you want this to be in B flat, then just do change instrument and change it to trumpet, because then you're changing the transposition, the labels and the sound. So don't just go and change the sound. Also, if you do go into here and you go to the track inspector and you click on the little E icon and you change the sound in here and that kind of thing, also make sure you change the expression map, because otherwise you could end up with an expression map for a choir that might have key switches, and you're playing it on a piano and you're hearing these really lumbly, growly low notes that you don't want, or you need the key switches to make something happen and they're not happening because you don't have the right expression map. Now you can choose the right expression map and make all of those changes as well if you want, but actually you might just find it's quicker in setup mode to change the instrument and have Dorico change everything else for you. So that's what I've done in this other project that I've just opened, which also has all the chord symbols in it. So that's why it says treble staff. Now this label, you might not want this label. Where's this label come from? So the other thing is that when you're working on the full score, there are no staff labels in this version, and that's because it started as a lead sheet. And actually, Anthony's Tips Tuesday, I think this week, was on the fact that you might not have your staff labels when you want them. So we're going to look at that one in a second as well. But also this treble staff here, this label here, if you wanted to change that because you need it to say lead or something, then in setup mode, this label is the layout name, which is over here. So this is the label here. So if I change this, double click on it and say lead for a lead sheet, for example, then you'll get lead here in this box here. And that's because if you go to engrave mode, this section here, and we can have a look in our first page template down here, it's using layout name. So that's a clue, of course, that it's using layout name. And that, so in setup mode, make sure you go to over here to the layout name and change that. You can do rename from here as well, but double click is a bit quicker. If you don't want that to be in a box, so if you wanted the name lead, but you don't want it to be in a box, then if you go to the library menu and paragraph styles, then in the paragraph styles you can find the layout name here, this one, and it tells you the size and the font and everything else, and you can change the style, but more importantly, you down here untick border. So if you don't want a border, you can turn it off. I quite like it, so I'm going to leave it on, but just in case, because I know some people do or don't want those. We'll look at fonts as well in a second. I know the problem is every time I go, oh, hang on a minute, here's this thing. There's some questions in the chat about, what about this gap here? What about these clefs and key signatures? We'll get to all of them. Do not worry, it's fine. But we'll try and get through a little bit more kind of sequentially. So let's have a look next at, so we've got these chord symbols. Let's not divert from the chord symbols. Now, you might not like the chord symbol that is displaying. You might want a different option. The first thing I would check is in the library menu in engraving options, because in here there is a whole section on chord symbols. If you've been with us a while, then we're constantly changing and working on chord symbols. It's almost it's an in-joke in the team that there's always somebody working on chord symbols because there's another option we want. Anyway, so there are some chord symbol presets at the top. So you might want to choose one of these. You can choose between Nashville numbers or jazz standards or New York style or Indiana, Brant Roma, various options that you can choose in here. And that will change these presets to be something else. So this is the look of things that are going on there. But as I find with a lot of people, they want to make very particular little changes to things. Now, start with these presets, because these may well give you the thing that you want. Obviously you want Nashville numbers. If you want jazz standards and you want particular styles, or you want a Ted Ross style or something else, start with that, because it's going to be the best place to start. If you don't want these, or you want to make little changes to some of these, scroll down. Now, this is a big dialogue with all sorts of things in it, and you may get lost. So have a look at these. So various things to do with B and B flat for starters. We're not going to do those. I'm not doing solfege chords today either, but they're there. I'm also not really going to do Nashville ones today, but there we go. So chord quality, major and minor. Some people will go for this one. Don't do that, because that's the appearance of major triads, not major 7, major triads. Don't choose that option. The appearance of minor triads. Some people prefer a minus. If you prefer a minus, also change this option, because otherwise the minus might not be in the right place. I think commonly superscript is often a good option for a lot of fonts, but be aware, changing one thing, you might also want to change the others. I quite like M. It's a lot shorter than min. I'm not keen on, but this is all personal preference, so you can change the options that you want. So I'm going to leave those ones. Now, when you have a diminished triad, so you've got a minor flat 5, do you want this? Do you want a circle? When you've got diminished 7th, do you want this or this one? When you've got things like, in fact, somebody in the chat said earlier there was a particular thing they want. I think it was half diminished, so they wanted this one. So this is our default. In fact, I think later on in this one, did I not put one in this one? Yes. So so we've got minor 7 flat 5. You can say, well, actually, I'd like a slash with a circle, and then do you want it superscript or baseline or subscript? So there are options for those as well. And we will look at fonts as well in a minute, but so basically you can go through and choose all of these options. When you have G sus2, do you want G2 or G sus2? It's a very religious chord, that one, isn't it? If you wanted sevenths, are they baseline or subscript? So this is where you can change lots of things, and they will then change for all of these chords. Somebody was asking earlier about major 7th in the chat. Sorry, I can't remember who it was. But when you're looking for major 7th, I've got this one, but if you prefer a triangle for your major 7, then you can have that. If you want, when you have a triangle, to include the 7, then choose this option. If you don't want to include the 7, choose this one. So now, the really good thing about this dialogue, really, really good thing, is you can choose options, you can press apply, and you'll see it happen while the dialogue is still open. If you have 2 monitors, or if you can just a large monitor and separate them, then you can see the options that you've got here, and you can see them happen on the project behind you. So at the beginning of this piece, where I've got this E flat major 7, if I wanted to say triangle with a 7, then I can do this. I can press apply. I can resize this dialogue a little if I need to as well. So now I've got E flat triangle 7. If I don't want the 7, then I can use this and I can remove it. You see, it's also done this one over here. So this is where you can change the settings, at least to start with, change the settings to get the options that you want. Now, I'm sort of following the real book, but as most people do, they go, yeah, I'll follow the real book, but I don't like that. So you'll probably end up with some other changes that you make. And it depends which real book you use. I think Misty's in at least 3 versions of the real book, in 3 completely different looking fonts and styles and that kind of thing. So everybody's going to have their own preference for how they want it.
So yeah, so anyway, similar for minor, you can have a minor with a triangle and a 7. Maybe that makes it easier than a M major 7. Yeah, maybe. So anyway, choose the options. Also for alterations, things like this. Do you want it baseline or superscript? Do you want them in brackets? How do you want them to be stacked? All of these kind of options. There's all sorts of options that you can choose. I'm only halfway down this dialogue, so I'll keep going for a minute. You may find that Dorico starts putting things like emit 3, and you go, oh, that's a bit weird. Well, maybe... Now, there's an option in the preferences we looked at before in the library menu for note input as to whether you even care about omitting 5 or omitting 3 and that kind of thing. But if you are displaying them, then how do you want them to display the options that are there? I'll keep going. Things like alter bass notes. Now, I want to include this one because the default is this. So if you've got C and then the bass is changing, but the chord isn't, this is Dorico's default. And people often say, why have I only got a slash something and not the chord? If you prefer this option, choose this option. If you like it as your default, press save as default. That's what this dialogue is about. So also don't be confused with polychords, because polychords obviously is 2 stacked chords. So if you're doing Phantom of the Opera or the other thing I was talking about the other day, but actually I've forgotten, and you've got 2 minor chords stacked together or whatever, then you want to show those clearly, and you don't want those to be too similar to anything you've got with a slash bass note. So make sure you've set up all of the options that you want. Also, there's some things with transposition and what happens with enharmonic spelling of things with chords. There's some modal chord symbol options, and then there's some position things about the ideal spacing above the staff and those kind of things and what happens to them. Which one of these is stacked? The horizontal position of things. If you've got transposed chord symbols, capo things, how they display and that kind of thing. The design of various individual bits, and we'll come on to more of that in a second. Do capo chords show as an italic or in parentheses? So some of those. And then there's a project default appearances, which we will come back to in a minute because that one's important. So this is the dialogue to change to start off with, because you want to change the chords probably as a whole style for the whole piece. So the changes I was making to major chords and that kind of thing, the major 7s, they were all changing. That's the best place to start to change any of these and set up your own defaults for exactly the thing you want. Now, if there are little individual things that you want to change, then you can also do that. So when you go to engrave mode, and you choose a chord symbol here. Now, whereas in write mode, if you double click on a chord symbol, or if you choose it and press enter, you'll edit the chord so you could type a new chord, a new version of it. If you're in engrave mode and you double click on a chord symbol, then you get the chord symbol appearance dialog. Because we're in engrave mode, we're talking about the visual appearance of these. Now you can edit the individual bits of this chord and you can resize them, for example. So maybe just for some reason this major 7th chord needs a slight graphical tweak to it. So I'm going to change those bits. I'm going to press OK. Now just this one has changed. This one hasn't. This one hasn't. It's only this one chord here. So that's where maybe just for a bit of space or for something else, you need to just tweak something with that particular chord. So it's not changing the size of the 7th and all of the 7ths everywhere. It's not changing the major 7 for all of them. It's not even changing the other E flat major 7. It's just literally changing that one version. Now, if you decide you make a change to this and actually you want that to apply to the other E flat major 7, then you can do that. In the engraving options where we were for chord symbols, right at the bottom, click on this project default appearances. There's an edit button here. In here, now you can use this top section and enter chord symbols and edit them here as well. But this is the one that I've just created, this single override. And if I press this button here, then it will promote that to the project default appearances. So now when I press close, that chord has now changed all of the E flat major 7s for everything. Hasn't changed the A flat major 7. So at some point in the future, hopefully we'll have a way of doing those kind of things, so you can make the change to that symbol
for the whole project, but at the moment you would need to change the A flat major 7s separately to the E flat major 7s, but you can promote to the E flat major 7s so that you've got the same all the way through the whole project. If you make a change and you decide, actually, I've made a mistake and I didn't want that, you can choose it and you can delete it from here, and then it will go back to the defaults. Because I've changed this a bit early, really, because actually what you want to do first is decide the type of font you want to use. But I wanted to show you where these options are for changing the chord symbols. So start off in library engraving options in the chord symbols section. You can decide all of the options that you want, how you want the look to be generally for a lot of those items, and then you can make individual changes to some of those. I'm going to move on to some of the other sections because there's all sorts of things that we need to look at for lead sheets. If you really want a lot more detail about chord symbols, maybe early next year, let's have a look at doing another session on chord symbols and kind of, the editing of those kind of things. But we'll, let's see what we go. So let's have a look. So some of these are the questions that are coming up. I want to answer some of these as well. So let's say we've done the playback bit. So let's say in this project we also want to add guitar frames. So these chord symbols that are appearing here. Now, chord symbols are global items, so they will apply for all instruments. So when we add some more instruments in a minute, we'll see how that works. But in a similar way, if you want to add guitar frames to this, and we're just talking about our lead sheet, I can right-click, so in setup mode, right-click on the player, and instead of chord symbols, I can say chord diagrams. So these are the guitar frame diagrams. So I can choose a tuning, and there's all sorts of options you can choose here. You can create your own tunings as well. I'm just going to say standard guitar tuning for now, and it will add these above the staff as well. So these guitar frames are automatically generated from these chord symbols. If you want to change this one, then you can press Shift Q. Sorry, Shift Q. You can press Alt Q or Option Q, and you can change to one of the other options. And if I keep going with Option or Alt Q, it will cycle around all of the options that you could possibly want until you find some things that you may or may not want. There was the same one again. Now, if you press Option Shift Q, you'll get this dialog, which is the choose chord diagram. So that's Option Shift Q. I was going to do it at some point, wasn't I? Q. Option Shift Q. Or if you have Alt on your computer, then it's Alt Shift Q. Depends what the key's labelled as. So choose your chord for it. So if you wanted to choose it from here, instead of just cycling around them, if you want to choose them, that's a pretty looking one. You can tell I'm not a guitarist. Let's have that one. So you can change them that way if you want to. So any of these chords, Option Shift Q, you can choose a different version of the diagram if you need it and change those ones. Now, there are also some other options for these and what you want to do with them. So, for example, if you go to the library menu and layout options, then for chord symbols and diagrams, for fingerings in chord diagrams, you can decide you want to include the fingerings. So let me just press apply. So you can put little fingerings, tiny ones in there. You may want to increase the size of those if you're going to do that. If you want to put them at the end of the string, then maybe they're maybe slightly more usable, and change the size of those as well because they're far too big. So you can show fingerings in those chord diagrams if you want them. I'm just going to switch to another project for a second because there's another option for these chord diagrams. If you have a piece that already has them in, and if you'll find one of the demo scores on your computer that came with Dorico is Clocks by Coldplay. I know some people don't like it. Hi, Philly. But this one is just a useful example if you want to kind of follow along with this example. So we've got some chords in this and in this piece already. If you go to the library menu and go to layout options, in the chord symbols and diagrams, choose this option here, show chord diagrams used at start of flow. So I'll tick that box. Now there are some options here for tunings, the different tunings you want, or capo or anything else, some of the scale options for how big they are. But anyway, what it's going to do is this: it's going to take all the chords from the piece and it's going to display them here in a kind of Hal Leonard style. Here are all the frame diagrams that are used in this piece, and you can use these if that would be useful. And actually this takes up less space than adding all the guitar frames on every chord. So in some cases, this is quite a useful option publishing-wise of saying, here's the chords when you need them, and you can reference them. And obviously, you can change these in a very similar way to the other ones. but without displaying one on every system and therefore increasing the gaps between all the systems. So that's in the library menu, layout options, and the reason it's in there is because it's applying to the layout that you're using. So I'm going to turn that off again for a second. There we go. So it applies just to that layout. So if you're making a PVG layout or something else, it applies to that layout that you're using. Back to this version for a second. There's other things that you want to change, and I saw some of them come up in the comments. So let's knock off some of these as well. So the first thing is bar numbers. These bar numbers, you may not want to display bar numbers. So if you go to layout options again, a lot of these things are in layout options. And this is why it's important that I am looking at the part that I'm using, not the score. If you want these options to apply to all of your layouts, then choose these buttons, select all, select parts, select score, select parts. But I'm just working on this lead sheet. So when I go to bar numbers here, I can go to none, and turn that on, and now I have no bar numbers here. Now I still have bar numbers in my score. Maybe it's useful in the score, and I'm going to add more to that one in a little while to have those. I've also got the frame diagrams on in this one, which I don't really need. So I'm going to turn those ones off again. So we'll go chord symbols and diagrams, and I not that one. I go to setup mode, apologies, and I'm going to turn off my diagrams by going to no chord diagrams. There we go. So no bar numbers, no chord diagrams. Now, somebody said, what about this gap at the beginning over here? I think, so let's do that one next. I'm just making sure on my notes I don't miss anything, so apologies if I do. In your layout options for staves and systems, how did I get to layout options so quick? Library menu layout options, all of these have a shortcut. We've used layout options, engraving options, and note input options today. They're all, well, it depends if you're on a Mac or PC, but they're either Command Shift or Control Shift, and then the letter of the thing you want. So E for engraving options, L for layout options, where I am now. So Command Shift L, Control Shift L. In the staves and systems section here, there's an indent of the first system of the flow. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to put 0. This is just on the layout I'm using again. So I press apply and close. Now these layout options actually, if I had 2 monitors and could show you that on the live stream, I would leave this dialog open because I'm in here changing all sorts of things. But at the moment, I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller so we can see things. But now we've got rid of that indent there. All the other things that you might want to change. So now we've turned off the bar numbers. Maybe you will have some rehearsal marks. So if you choose a bar line or a note and you press Shift A, then you'll get a rehearsal mark. Let's say we want another one. Let's say it's here. So I'll just press Shift A again. I know that one was A, but Shift A, and it automatically increments those to be the next one. In our engraving options, Command Shift E, or in the library menu, for engraving options, there are some sections down here for rehearsal marks. This is where you can say that the sequence type is letters, numbers, or bar numbers. Depending on your lead sheet type, you might want to change some of those. The positions of things. I find this option really useful. It automatically positions a rehearsal mark that's at the beginning of the system, which is not that one, but if it was at the beginning here, it would appear above the clef there, which just handily gets it out of the way. And if you're doing a lead sheet, regular 8 bars, and you want that rehearsal mark to always be at the left, out of the way, down the edge of the page, that's a really useful option and gets out of the way of any tempos or anything else that's happening in there. So choose that option there. You can also in there, I forgot to say, you can also change things like the rounded rectangle or circle, or not have an enclosure. There's various options for those. There are also individual overrides, as there are in lots of things for Dorico in the properties panel. So down here in the properties panel where I was, you can click on this one and you can change the sequence type and the index. If it needs to start again at C or something, you can change that. You can add a prefix and a suffix if you really need to those as well. So that's a useful option. Just Shift A to create them when you need them. You will probably find that you have, when you're doing things like lead sheet type, that you want a regular number of bars. And actually,
This particular one doesn't work that well for it, but I'm going to show you anyway. So again, we're back in the layout options. If you haven't used the shortcut for this yet, you probably should. In the staves and systems where we were before, we've just removed the system indent. We go to casting off, and there's an option for fixed number of bars per system. There was a thread recently on Facebook about where does casting off come from. It's an old publishing term, won't go into it right now, but casting off is the general laying out, old school engraving, scratching things into metal plates, deciding the spacing and everything else on there. Well, Dorico, you can do that after. But the casting off is what it's called. Fixed number of bars per system, 4 is the default, so I'll press apply, and now we'll get a fixed number of bars. The problem is that you don't always want a fixed number of bars, because sometimes you want to change some of them. So actually this is a little bit cramped, and if you have the lead sheet in front of you, then you'll notice that actually this bar should be on the next page. So to do that, go to engrave mode, and there's these move to previous system, move to next system, and the shortcuts for these, because they have sort of arrows on them, the greater than, less than symbols, move to next system, push that way, is full stop or period. So I'm just going to select this note and press full stop or period, and that moves it to that page there. And the same with this one. This first time bar actually goes onto the next system. Now everything else is going to be 4 bars, as expected, but it means you can make these little overrides. The way it's doing that is, and you might, if you've still got your signpost turned on, then you'll notice these little signposts that you've got. So it's adding a system break at that point, but by pushing the bar. But it's also really useful if you need to bring, for example, this bar back, you can just press the comma button and it will bring it back to that one instead and add that system break. I'll just press undo because I don't want that one in this particular case. But you can do that. So you can set a standard 4 bars per system, and then you can just kind of occasionally push and pull individual bars to other systems if that would be useful, if that's what you need. So I'm going to turn my signpost off again. There we go. So we did the wing repeats. I'm just trying to make sure I don't miss anything. Sorry. We did that one. That's fine. While we were looking at repeats, if you needed a coda, it's not a coda, but let's say this is a coda. If you press Shift R for the repeats pop over, because we're talking about repeats, and type the word coda, you will get a coda and a coda symbol. It will automatically put the gap in here if it's needed, unless it's at the beginning of a system. So you have a coda. If you wanted a repeat symbol, this isn't going to make any sense, but I'll put it in anyway. Let's say here. No, let's say here. It's not going to make any sense. Shift R, if you press the $sign, then that's going to give you the little senyo as well. So you have senyos and you have codas. If you want to change the size of some of these, now actually, if you find me a published example where they are commonly bigger, I'd be interested to see it, because people say, but that's too small. Well, it would be nice if it was readable, but actually in a lot of the published works, they aren't actually that big. So if you've got some, I don't know, a Boozy or a Baron writer, do they even use them? I don't know. But, something where they're published, let me know. Anyway, in engraving options, there are repeat markers. And in here, you can change the size and various options for repeat markers and what they do and how they look and all this kind of things. And there's also, they're changing the size of this gap, and there's the repeat count options as well. There's also things like scale factor size. If you wanted to change the size globally of those items, then you can change the scale factor in here if you want to. So have a look in here, engraving options in the library menu for repeat markers. You can, of course, just change the individual size. If you choose this item here and you just want this one item for some reason to be a different size, then use the scale or custom scale, probably over here, and you could set a custom scale percentage for the selected item if that would be a useful thing for you to do. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes. So somebody also said in the comments, but these clefs and key signatures, I don't want them on the other lines. Now, this is a hangover thing from the old. I get it. From all the real book things, and I've played lots of them. It's a bit annoying in the tunes that have lots of key changes, but anyway, presuming it doesn't, like Misty doesn't, it's not changing key, and you want to remove the clefs and key signatures just to give you a bit more space in all of those lines and to make it look a bit more like that style, then you can do it. So what you want to do is go to the notation options. So it's on my other screen. So it's in the library menu, notation options, and if you click on key signatures,
then there is an option here to hide key signatures. So key signatures at start of systems following the first system, so everything except the first one, then press apply, and the key signatures now disappeared. Now this is for this flow. If you are working on lead sheets and you've got multiple lead sheets all on the same project, they will all be listed down here. I don't, so I only have one, that's fine, but just be aware of that. While you're in here in notation options, then you might also want to go to clefs, because the clefs also has an option, clefs at start of a system following the first system, hide. So look at the subsequent ones, so now they're all disappearing. Now you'll notice, of course, there's a bar line missing from there. So when you go to bar lines, still in notation options here, and this is where you can change the normal end bar line as well, and the bar line joins, and various other things. But you can also say bar lines at start of first system, do you want to show a little bar line or not? And bar lines at the start of systems following the first system. Now the real book tends to have no bar line at the beginning, but it does have one here, or at least in a couple of the examples I was looking at as reference today. So you get this. So you don't have one here, but you do have one here. So if that's a useful option, they're all in notation options in the library menu, notation options in the bar lines or the clefs or the key signatures to turn various things there. Now also in this particular piece, I'm just going to remove that coda as well. You might find in some pieces, let's see if it'll fit on this one. It might just about fit on this one. That because they originally started just with some manuscript paper of a set number of lines, at the end you sometimes have an extra line of manuscript paper if there's space. And sometimes it's useful just to have, fill in the extra space with some blank staves, please, because I might want to make some notes during this, some notes about what my solo is going to be or something else. So if you go back to layout options, I'm going to use a shortcut now. In here, for the page setup section, for the flows. So this is at the end of the flow if there's enough space. So that's why it's in the flows section here. And there's an option to fill frames with blank staves. So if I say after every flow, only in case you've got multiple flows, and press apply, then it's going to add a blank staff here. There's also, if you were showing clefs normally, then there's an option to include or exclude clefs. Now I've turned them off anyway with the other option, so I don't need to do it, but you might want to do excluding clefs. So there's options here. Now if you wanted a different number of staff lines, then there's an option for that too, but we do want the same number of staff lines. We want 5 lines, that's fine. But that just gives you the option there of saying, now we've got an extra line at the end. So if there's space on the page, it will automatically now add 1 or more staves to fill in the rest of the page, just in case you want it for some blank staves at the end, which is quite nice. Now the next options, let me just check. Okay, so there's a couple of questions about fonts. Let's dive into this. So I'm so far using the standard Bravura font in Dorico, which you may or may not want to use. So let's look at changing them. So there's, let's say, 2 categories, I'm not sure, of fonts. There's the text and there's the music itself. So let's start with the music. If you go to the library menu and go to music fonts, then in here it shows you the music fonts you have installed. I have a couple of extra ones installed as well, but you will have Bravura in here. You'll also have Petaluma in here. And as of Dorico 5, maybe it's Dorico 4, I can't remember. I think it's in Dorico 5 at some point. All of the finale ones are in here as well. So they are automatically added because they are Smoofle fonts. Dorico uses Smoofle fonts, which is what this SMFL at the end of some of the fonts means if you've bought any others. So there are various options that you can choose for fonts in here. So the first one I'm going to look at is Petaluma, because that one's ours. And because in that dialog it said also update the text fonts, you'll see that also the text items for those fonts, so these items, these labels, everything has then updated to follow an appropriate text style to also follow those. So that's one of the options, is to just change one of those. Let's have a look at a couple of others. So if I go to music fonts, if I choose Finale Jazz, then Finale Jazz is updated, so I've now got the Finale Jazz style.
There's a couple of other things that change size accordingly. So this is what I mean about you didn't want to change your major 7s before you'd updated everything else. You don't want to change the size and the position of your flats before you've chosen the font that you want to use. So make sure you do those kind of in the right order and choose the option that you want. And then, yes, all of the other options that you have with your text and chord symbols. Let's have a look at another one. So, Finale Jazz, you might have Golden Age is a good one. Actually, I'll put a link after the session. I'll put a link underneath the session to this one. But Golden Age is one by Ben Byron Wigfield. Again, nice looking jazz font. It's very clear, this one, actually, for reading, I find, but everybody has their own preferences. So you can change those kind of things en masse, and then you can change things more individually if you need to. So let's say, for example, the text for some of these items. So they will either be in library font or paragraph styles. I'm going to start with paragraph styles. In the paragraph styles section here, you can change things like the titles. So this is using this title here, Misty. Errol Garner. I don't think I showed you where I put the text in, did I? Let me show you that. So in the File menu, Project Info, this is where you would want to put for the project, the title and the composer. And if you had one, a lyricist. The lyricist was Johnny Burke. I haven't added any lyrics. If you want to add lyrics, I did this in the last session, the one on choral. Let's Shift L. Look at me. Just pressing the space bar to move on. So it's what's the words? Something as lost as a kitten in a tree. I've forgotten. Well, that'll do. Yeah, you can tell I'm a sax player and I don't pay attention to the words. So if you press hyphen, then of course it's going to add extra hyphens. If you press them twice, get in a tree, and if you press spacebar, then it'll add melismas, which I don't need at that point. So I'm going to press delete to backspace. Anyway, so Shift L for lyrics. You can add lyrics and chords. Have a look at the previous live stream because there was loads of stuff on lyrics if you needed them, verse numbers and everything else. But now we've got the lyricist as well. So the fonts, let's change the fonts. Text fonts, paragraph styles and title. So this is going to be the font style that this is using here. So at the moment it's Golden Age regular. So you could say, you want to change a style if it exists in the font. You could change the size, and you can also change the font completely. So this little toggle here is saying that it's grayed out because it's following the default text option. So if you want to change lots of the just text items, you can go to default text and you can change the option here for the font that it's using, and that will update lots and lots of things. But when you want to get a bit more granular, you can go to the individual items, and instead of using that parent, you can override it and say you want to use something else. So let's say you wanted to use, there was a reprise stamp thing, wasn't there, from, it might be a Sibelius option or something. Whichever font you want to use anyway. Reprise title, let's use that one. So this kind of, you either love it or hate it, I suppose, with fonts. But if you want to change those and change the size, then paragraph styles. If you want to change, what other examples would be useful? The lyricist is one, the fonts is one, so you can change those, the rehearsal marks if you wanted to, I suppose, and the chord symbols themselves. So the chord symbols, if you wanted to update various things with those, when you go to font styles in here, there's a chord symbols font. There's also a chord symbols music text font. I have a couple of additions. I've obviously added a couple of examples which I shouldn't have done at the moment. But you've got a chord symbols font and you've got a music text font. So it depends whether you're editing the flat music symbol or the text bits as to which font you want to use. So that one's using Petaluma text and that one's using Golden Age. So some of these will revert back to using some of the other jazz fonts, so they kind of have a fallback system, if you like, for the fonts. But make sure you're choosing the right ones. So if I change this, what did we look at before? The Finale Jazz one. So it updates everything except my override, of course.
and then I can go to font styles, and now the chord symbols font is using Finale Jazz Text, and this one is using, it's gone back to Petaluma in that particular case. But you can update those individual items if you need them. There's also one for the alto bass separator, because that needs to be slightly different, and in the chord diagrams for the guitar options, they have different font options as well. But you can change then kind of these individual items, so as well as the size that we looked at before, you can change the font that's being used on some of those. If you need to change individual particular items, you also might want to go to music symbols, and sometimes there are items in here that you can change and update with a particular font. So if there's a particular coda symbol that you wanted to change or that kind of thing, then you can have a look in here on. Actually, that's a bad example. But you can have a look in here and you can change particular items. Oh, yes, of course, they are updated from somewhere else. But, so there are things like I was looking at multi-segment lines and things with somebody the other day, all of these kind of things. If you wanted to update things for a particular font, then they exist in here, and you can change them and update them to a particular font if that was a useful thing to do. So there's all sorts of things, but there are some things which you'll find in library font styles, and there are some things that you'll find in library paragraph styles, depending on the options that you want to look at. So these are the paragraph styles ones. Now you'll also find in some cases it's useful to make your own paragraph styles for things. So when you do things like add text items, so if I choose a note just for the sake of somewhere to put something and press Shift X, then I can type in things like verse. Now, that's just going to use the standard font styles that are with this project at the moment. So it's using Finale Jazz Text. The paragraph style is default text. But you can make your own paragraph styles. So if you wanted to make your own paragraph styles that do particular things, then you can do that yourself and make your own paragraph styles. So you make them in library paragraph styles. Now you can make little individual changes in here if you really wanted to. So you could say, if this is back to default, that we're adding something into here, and then we're tweaking the size of this to be a particular size or underline or anything else. But you're only changing one item then. So really, I would make a paragraph style first. My trick for doing these as well, that I've mentioned before, is when you make a paragraph style. So I've got one here called Small Italics. I've needed a Small Italics font often. So I've made a little paragraph style for it, and I've clicked the little star. And the reason for clicking the star is that then it's available in the preferences key commands that you can add a shortcut to it. So you can then save a shortcut for that particular paragraph style. So instead of pressing Shift X or Shift Alt X for system text, you can press your particular shortcut for your text with that paragraph style already applied, which can be much, much quicker. Especially if you're using multiple items that are all the same. Now, some of these things that you might want to also use, do a quick manual version here. So there are all sorts of fonts in here. If you look for things like, was there a Finale one? They did do one at one point. What was the one that had the overline options? Somebody tell me quick in the comments. I'll come back to that one because I'll show you a different one that I know exists as well. So when you've got things like, there was one that they did called Pori Overline. So this font has a line over the top of it automatically. And then if you use I think it's the square brackets, that end and this end, then you can also have things like this. So I'll put a link to this one. The Pori one is by Notation Central. It's because Sibelius doesn't use Smoofle yet. I mean, I don't know if it ever will. But they've sort of copied things which usefully look like our normal jazz font, so Petaluma. So come on, Sibelius, catch up, use Smoofle. But anyway, there's a text font overline, there's an underline one as well. In fact, with both sides, if you want a line on both sides, you can effectively have a box with these rounded corners. The rounded corners are just done with the square brackets. So I'm typing a square bracket, as you can see from my shortcut at the bottom down here, and it's adding that as a curve because that's the way the font is shown. the finale one, somebody tell me what the finale one was. Finale jazz text, question mark. It may well be, Dave. Let's have a look. So if I do Shift X again, and let's say this was a verse something in finale jazz text, but I think you have to add, what do they use? It's not those brackets. It can't be that one. It can't be that one. It must be a different one. Jazz extended jazz font text. Oh, it's not that one. What's the finale one? I know you had one. It was just complicated to type all of the text in, wasn't it? Not legacy. There are other in-between characters, yes, but I didn't think it was finale jazz text. Maybe you do have to type other very particular characters. It's not that one. Yeah, it was slashes, wasn't it, to put between the text, so it's not finale jazz text. Anyway, whichever the finale one is, you can use it if you want to. It's just a little bit more complicated to use because of the way the way they work. So if you need that one, then give me a shout sometime and I'll work out what it was. Maybe it's just literally jazz text. Ah, it's jazz text, isn't it? There we go. So if I put these in, square bracket gives me that one, and if I type a slash between every letter, there we go, that's the one. It's jazz text. You are correct, Dave. It's finale jazz text, not finale jazz text. Yeah. Yeah, so that gives you these options. So you can then decide if you do or don't want the end bit or not, you know, because you can just put slashes between everything, or if you want to put a bracket at the end, if you want the underline version, then you can do those as well. I'm sure you know how those fonts work in Finale if you've used them before, but you can use those in Dorico as well, should you need to. Now, when you're adding these, don't normally add them just as Shift X. Let's look at some other parts and other things and the reason why you'd want to do this. So when you're creating a lead sheet, think possibly you might want to do other instrumentation, you might want to do other things and how they would work. So for all of these items, you know, that you want to do, make changes to things that would possibly work for other parts, because in my experience, when I've been making a lead sheet, you just go, oh yeah, I just do a quick lead sheet for this. Somebody is going to say, oh, could you also do it in a different key? For a different instrument, for or whatever. So save yourself some of the work, and when you create things like these, even if you're doing these manual ones, don't make them as staff attached text. Use Shift Alt X, because then it all works exactly the same, but it's system text, so then you can use them in multiple places. So just a quick recap. What we've got so far is we've got a full score with some different options in it. Its bar numbers are still on this one. I've been working on the part, because really that's probably what you want. Even if you don't want this little label at the top, if you don't want these in your lead sheets, that's fine. You can go to the page templates down here in engrave mode. You can edit all of these sections here. You can remove this section up here if you don't want it. You know, change the size of these and everything else. You can change it to be exactly what you want. But I'm going to leave this one on because I am going to be making some of these for different instruments. So let's go to setup mode. Now, you could make a new player, copy and paste everything over for a new instrument, but you can also have this as your reference music and just do a different key, a different version. So in setup mode, instead of adding a new player, on the right hand side for your layouts, click on this little music stand at the bottom right, and it will give you an empty part. Put a little tick in the same instrument that you're using, which for me now is treble staff. It might still be lead for you, whichever instrument you've used. So now I've got a treble staff one over here. Now I want to call this something else. So this is going to be my alto sax. So I'm going to call it alto sax. And then this part over here on the right hand side, I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go to clef and transposition overrides. Now in this dialog, what it's going to do is create me some overrides just for this layout. So I need the same clef, that's fine, but written middle C needs to be a sixth below, so I'm going to go for E flat 2, because it was on, oops, sorry, my mistake. There we go, E flat 2. So it's not middle C anymore, it's going to be E flat 2, and that's because it's an E flat saxophone. So if I now go to this new part, it's following my label, so here's my new part, then I now have a saxophone part here.
For alto sax, because it's following the label that I've got for here, it's got it's got everything else I needed. Now, actually, in this case, I've been saved also by the fact I made this as a system attached bit of text. And I've been saved, but in a minute that won't work. But all of the items that I had are all exactly the same, and not only that, but these notes are also the same. So this note here, if I was to change the octave on it, for example, and then go back to my lead part, it's also changed there. So that's a good way of doing multiple different transpositions, all with exactly the same music, because it is all the same notes, just in different keys. You could also change the clef, make a trombone version if you wanted to in C. You could change things, and you might have an octave issue there. Now, if you need to, you can also create a new instrument over here. So press Shift P, or use the button at the bottom, which is just behind my head. Just over there, and type in the instrument that you need. So let's say we want a trumpet this time, trumpet in B flat, and so now in my full score, now I'll actually get that separate instrument in here. So I've got my lead part and my trumpet part, but you can't see them because we started at the lead sheet. We've got no staff labels. So if you want to see your staff labels again, because that's the way you started, go to Layout Options, go to Staves and Systems, turn on your staff labels, full and abbreviated, press Apply and Close. So now I can see the one I started with and my trumpet part in B flat. Let's put that note back where it was supposed to be. Now, what you could then do is, if you've got the first note selected, go to Edit and select to End of Flow. So it will select everything to the end of flow, all of the staff attached items. Now, you'll notice my chord symbols are not being selected. That's fine right now. I'll show you why in a minute. All of these staff selected items, so I'm just going to deselect a couple of things, for example, with Control, and I'm going to Alt-click here, so that it selects them. I have previously also used Select More for a lot of these things. So if you're selecting a whole line of lyrics, you can select one, and you can then press Command-Shift-A or Control-Shift-A to select all the things in that bar. If you press it again, it selects all the things in that system. The problem with notes is if I select one note and press Command-Shift-A for Select More, and then press it again, it selects all of those. If I press it again, it selects all the way through the flow, and you think, brilliant, that's exactly what I wanted, except I didn't select a tuplet, and those are individual items. So you'd also have to make sure you've Command-selected a tuplet and press Select More to select all the tuplet items. Otherwise, you'll end up copying the notes without the tuplets. All your notes will go, all your rhythms will go really squiffy, which is possibly a slightly British phrase, but it's not something you want, believe me. So select a note, go to Edit, and go to Select to End of Flow, and so they're all selected. So now in my trumpet part, it's transposed, and I've got the label. And I've got the text if I wanted it. Maybe I didn't want to select that, but I've now got that. Now it's not exactly the same note as all of the other parts, so it depends how you want to work. Do you actually want different notes, or do you want the same note but in multiple different keys? Same note in multiple different keys, create a new layout over here and reference the same player. If you want different notes, create a new player over here, it'll make a new part, and you can go from there. There are options if you need them over here as well, to right click, and you can propagate part formatting. So if you've made multiple different layouts, you've edited all the layout options for one of them, and you want to propagate that to some of the others, choose this option. You can choose one part, and you can propagate the formatting to any of the other instruments if you needed to. So your system setting, system layout options, all of those kind of things that you've got, the size of the staves, all of those, even where your system breaks are, you can propagate those to other parts should you need them. So there's a couple of different options there for creating parts in different transpositions or for different instruments depending on what you need. Now there's a few other things you might need for other types of lead sheets. Let's go back to this one. So not in this particular case, but things that you may also need. So let's look at some of these as well. The first is things like slash regions. So you just want to display some slashes. Slash regions can be selected whether you've got music in there or you don't have any music in there. Actually, just while I think about it, if you don't have any music in here, I'm just going to remove the music for a minute. If you've got bar rests and you're working, I said work in the part, it's a brilliant idea. The problem is at the beginning
of working on this in layout options, you'll find that your the options in here, sorry, in players, and the options for bar rest, multi-bar rests are on. So it will be making multi-bar rests, which you don't want. So make sure for your parts, I would select this button here to select all of your parts. Oops. I would select this button here to select all of your parts, and I would turn off multi-bar rests and press apply, because otherwise you get multi-bar rests, either displaying as a single multi-bar rest or lots of individual ones, in this case with chords turned on. So make sure you turn off the multi-bar rests. Just put the music back in there. Now slash regions, if I select a bar, whether it's got music in it or not, it doesn't matter. I'm going to select this bar and I'm going to select to here, and I'm going to press Shift R and I'm going to type the word slash. And that's going to put slashes in there. Now, because there was music already in there, it's going to also keep the music. It will still play back. So if you wanted it for a big band chart, for a solo section, it would still play back and everything else, but it will just display slashes. There are also options in here for whether you want these numbers to display or not. Again, they're in engraving options. If you want to change them, you don't want the brackets, you do want the brackets, you don't want them there at all, you can change those settings in engraving options. Now, also in the properties panel, you can do overrides for those kind of things, but the slashes are also going to be useful. Now, if I was to do this in the trumpet part, I'll just delete that for a second and go to the trumpet part. Now, there are no chord symbols in the trumpet part at the moment, and you may want them. So let's say we can add in some slashes in here. Let's say for 4 bars this time. And I'm just going to type Shift R, type slash, and put a slash region in there. Now, what you can do in setup mode, for this individual player, you can right-click on it and you can say chord symbols, show in chord symbol and slash regions. So if I choose that, then the chord symbols appear. So chord symbols in Dorico are system objects. So they will automatically appear for a rhythm instrument. If it's guitar, if it's bass, obviously not drums, they're really not bothered, piano, keyboard instruments, then the chord symbols will automatically appear. So those things are, obviously very useful because they commonly want them. But for other instruments, they don't necessarily want them all the time. If they only want chord symbols in the solo section, then you can use these slash regions, or if you need to show notes, if I delete that, if you need to show notes and you select some bars, then also you can find this in the right menu, and you can say create a chord symbol region, so that the chord symbols will only be shown during this chord symbol region. If this chord symbol region gets longer, if I drag it to be longer, the chords are shown. So that's one option, is if you only want the chord symbols in one particular place. But if you want the chord symbols all the time in this part, in setup mode, right-click on it, go to chord symbols, and tell it to show for all instruments. Whoops. Chord symbols. Show for all instruments. And that's all the instruments that this player is holding. So if, for example, they were a pianist and sometimes switching to trumpet, then they would only get chord symbols for the rhythm section instruments, the piano normally. But if they're holding multiple instruments, or it's just the trumpet, then you just want this one, and it will show the chord symbols. Now, I don't need to copy and paste those chord symbols into there. It's just going to automatically show them. And whichever instrument you now add over here, so for example, if I add a piano over here, in the piano part, the piano automatically gets chord symbols. I don't need to copy and paste them. I don't need to go to the score and copy and paste the chord symbols. But very occasionally, when you're working on something, you've got a structure of chord symbols that you want to copy. And what you'll probably have done or find if you've done this in Dorico is you've selected one or more bars like this. So I've selected some bars, and then I copy them, the notes, and the chord symbols won't copy. Now, the piano doesn't need them. That's why we do this. But if you do need to copy the chord symbols, because you need to put them later in the piece. So let's say if I click on this last bar line and press Shift B, add some more bars. Let's say these chord symbols here, I'm just going to use Select More. Selected one chord symbol, I use Select More, Control Shift A, and I'm going to move these chord symbols to here. Just copy them over, Alt click, or you can use copy and paste, so Control C, Control V. You can copy and paste the chord symbols down there. So now you've copied just the chord symbols. I'll just delete that, show you again. So when I'm selecting the notes, it's not selecting the chord symbols. So even if I do this and I use Select More, which is this shortcut I keep using in here, Command Shift A or Control Shift A. So if I do that, it's only selecting the notes. If I select a bar and one chord symbol and use Select More, See, I'm not getting quite what I wanted. So you make sure you've got notes and chord symbols if that's what you want, so that when you use the right shortcuts, now you can filter them. You could say, I like dragging a box over these things like this, and then I could filter the particular things. So you only want the chord symbols? Yes, you can go to Edit, Filter, Chord Symbols. You can also press J for the jump bar, and you can say Filter Chord Symbols. You could set a shortcut for that if you wanted to filter the chord symbols. But you'll know when you select a bar this way, it's not choosing the chord symbols. If you still have your system track turned on, Alt-T, or the view menu, and your system track, then this can be used to make selections. Press this little option here to make which is system selections, which includes the chord symbols because they're system items as well. So we've got everything. Now you could filter the chord symbols if you wanted to and copy them somewhere later if that was a useful thing to do. So, but make sure when you're selecting things, the right things are selected that you want to be able to copy, change, or anything else. And chord symbols are system items. So commonly, you don't need to copy the chord symbols because the rhythm instruments have already got them. Your instruments over here, you can just right-click on an instrument. You can say chord symbols and show for all instruments if you need to show the chord symbols, or hide them, of course. And you can optionally just put them in a solo section if you needed to do that for those as well. The other thing that you might want to do kind of between parts, and this is really why, even when I'm making a lead sheet, I often end up with a lead sheet, kind of treble staff or whatever, and something else like a piano or another instrument, either for transposition or otherwise. And sometimes it's for cues. So let's say in this bar here, where there's some held notes, we wanted actually to have a rhythm that's displayed. So I'm going to put it in the piano part, the top end of the piano. So I'm just going to say in here, it doesn't matter what the notes are. Let's put some notes in. There we go. That'll do. Maybe, maybe not. In fact, let's just do that. There we go. So maybe this rhythm wants to be cued in these instruments over here. So you can use the shortcut down here, which is this little button for cues. So you can press Shift-U, and I'm going to type the word piano. Choose piano A, and if I have my signpost turned on, you'd see the little signpost here. When I go to that lead sheet part, I'm just going to press W to jump to the part. Then you'll see the cue has appeared in here. Now the useful thing about this cue, and you can set this up as a system default, but you probably don't want to, you can say that this is a rhythmic cue. So it's automatically going to sit across the top of the staff and keep out of the way. The notes no longer matter. You can turn on use rhythmic slashes if you want to. If I just turn off my signpost for a second. And this piano text up here, you probably also don't want, so just turn on start text and that will also disappear. So now I've got a rhythmic cue on there. Maybe these chord symbols actually want to reference it. If you're in write mode and you drag this chord symbol to the left, it will move it for all of the instruments. So that C7 is now moved for all of the instruments. If that's not what you wanted, then in the particular part you're in, go to engrave mode and move that chord symbol in engrave mode. And you can see that it's still attached here, but it's just graphically changed here. So now when I go back to my full score, you can see only that one has moved position. It's moved in the score as well because I had the set local properties to globally. If I only had it on local, it would only change even in one part. So be careful of that option as well. But it's now moving that one. Now this one probably doesn't make a lot of sense to be there, but you know, maybe it's that one instead. Let's see. So if you need to show little cues and things like that, that's where it's useful to first have been working in the part in the first place and to have some other instrument in there that you add these cues to, because then you can just reference those in the lead sheet that you're making. And once you've done it in one of these, so once I've added this little cue over here and I've set some various options for it, I can just copy and paste it, or alt-click in my case, into another instrument. So, oops, I need to not be in engrave mode, I need to be in write mode. Copy and paste that cue to the trumpet down here. And now it's also got all of the same options set. So it's also got You see, it's got all of the same rhythms set there. Obviously, the chords are different because they're transposed, but it's got the label turned off, it's got the slashes turned on, all of those kind of things. You'll also notice in here, this is where I've got bar numbers turned on again, because I didn't change that option for all of the parts. I was only changing it in one particular part. So when you're making these kind of changes and you want them to kind of propagate to all of your projects, I would suggest that maybe kind of work on one that that you've got it how you want it. Maybe you've changed the options in the page templates for what you want it. You've changed the fonts, you've changed the settings, you have what you want. You can then either go to the file menu and you can save as project template. So you can save all of these settings and you've got your template exactly how you want it set, and save that project template that you can then use to start again. So what will then happen is when I start at the beginning today in the hub, I chose lead sheet, but in there you can even create your own category if you want to, with your own options in there. So then when you're in here in the Steinberg hub, you can create your own category like this personal one here, and you can add in your own options, or you can put it in one of ours if you like. Create your own bespoke lead sheet with your options in it that you want to use for your project. The other option you can do is if you go to the library menu and the library manager, you can be working on a project and think, oh, you know what? There's a bunch of things I did in another project and I would really like them in this project. So let's say we're working in a different project. We're working in Fly Me to the Moon. You know, it's another Quincy Jones arrangement. We're working on that one, and we want to use the Misty options that we'd set. So you can drag and drop, or you can click on this button, and you can choose the Misty file, and Dorico will compare the two projects, and you can optionally select which things you want to import. So maybe it's some of the text styles, maybe it's the layout options that you've set, those kind of things. Maybe it's the notation options, because some of the notation options we change for things like where the clefs were showing and that kind of thing. You can import one or more of those options. There's some all buttons over here if you want them, so it will toggle all of them. You can just see differences to just spot only the differences that happen between the two projects, but you can then import those settings into your current project if that would be a useful thing to do as well. So save yourself a project template, or at least when you've got one file, you can import just the settings out of that if it would be useful for other projects. And if you make page templates and you make page template changes down here and you need those in another project, then you can take the whole page template set and you can import and export those as well. There's some buttons here for importing and exporting those settings. So if you set up a complete page template of how you like it with all of the text areas where you want it, you can export that. And then in another project, you can import it and say, yes, these are all the settings I've got to save you doing it again. You could, of course, also just go to setup mode in your project. You could delete the flow. You could make a new flow. You've got all of the same settings and everything else you want already in that project. Just remember to press save as so you don't accidentally destroy your previous project at that point. Now, I've gone through lots and lots of things there. Actually, there's one more thing that I want to look at in this project, which is kind of a layout type thing that you might find useful. Now, this one's got too many bars at the end, so I'm just going to select this bar. I'm going to press Shift B and type trim, because I added too many bars that I don't need. It's going to trim off any empty bars. It's left this one because it's had chord symbols in it, but it's trimmed off all of the other unnecessary ones. Now, you might find it useful sometimes when we've had things like those text items, these kind of things. These, if you look at them in engrave mode when they're selected, then they will also have things like avoid collisions. So if you don't want, if you tick the box for avoid collisions, obviously they'll avoid collisions with other items, but sometimes that can affect your staff spacing between things. So you might sometimes want to turn those off. The other thing you can do for parts in particular is if you go to the layout options, for vertical spacing, there's an option in here for automatically resolve collisions between adjacent staves and systems. So what this is going to do is when you've got things like text items, rehearsal marks, all of those kind of things, you will find that they will automatically start spacing the staves apart a little bit. You might not want that. You might actually want more of a kind of a standard look, and you're happy to move rehearsal marks slightly to make things fit. So what I'd suggest you maybe have a look at trying is just for parts, because the score, you probably don't want to do this. The score often changes between various pages. You want more of the collisions to be avoided. But you can choose your part or parts and untick this option to resolve collisions. So when I press apply and close, you see now I've got more collisions between the staves. Now it may be in particular with lyrics, maybe this isn't a good idea, but this chart didn't originally have lyrics, so I'm going to remove them anyway. So now, yes, this rehearsal mark here, sorry, this first and second time repeat here is going to be a problem. So maybe there are things that I need to manually move, and that's probably because of things like this cue and things like that I've got in here. So, you know, maybe I didn't have that cue anyway. Maybe I did have that cue and I need to move around it. Either way, when you go to engrave mode, you can make graphical changes to these items, and you can move them now to fit them inside what you want. But it means all of your staves are a more kind of, you know, standard spaced out look. So if there are little things like maybe this rehearsal mark, maybe you're actually happy with doing that with your rehearsal mark, you know, making small changes to things to get the look you want, but with standard layouts. And the way you can do that with getting all of these standard spacings for parts, I would suggest, is go to layout options. In the vertical spacing, just turn off this automatically resolve collisions for that part. That may give you actually closer to what you want, instead of Dorico spacing some of these things out. Like I said, especially for things like text items that can start adding more space, maybe actually turn those off, just have a visual look at that page and move a few things for a lead sheet. That can also be quite useful. Right, I'm just going to check if I've covered everything. Let me know in the comments if there's something I haven't looked at, and I need to go back through some of these comments just to check. And I'm just going to read through the comments, but I think Daniel's been answering lots of these. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of comments. Okay, I can't possibly go through all of these live, so let's have a quick look just to see if there's anything I've missed. No, we covered that one. I've covered that one. Yeah. Okay, so we've at least covered some of these. So I think that's good. So let me know if there's particular things, a particular way you want to display a font, an item, something, a particular layout that you want to look at or copy. Then I think probably now you can ask us some comments in the live stream, but that'll stop in a second, or at least in a few minutes. Email me. The email address is discoverdorico, all one word, discoverdorico @steinberg.de. I get quite a few emails, so bear with me, but I promise I will get to them, and then I can look at any particular things, questions that you've got for your particular case. I do find that lead sheets, similar to kind of some of the jazz options and various other things, there's more than one way to do things. You may find that the Dorico option by default isn't the thing you want. That's fine. You can create your own defaults for what you need, but if it's not exactly correct out the box, the size of the flat symbol in the chord symbol or something else, then I'm sure it's something we can change for you in your project. So let me know. There was a question, for example, in the comments. Somebody said they were confused. So if you were confused, maybe email me and let me know. Obviously, you can rewatch this session at any point, and rewatch it and see if that helps. But if not, email me and let's have a look at some of these options, some of these particular cases. Chord symbols inside the staff. Somebody did ask. I nearly forgot. Well done for reminding me again. So let's just say in this part, we've got a section. Let's say this bit here. And we don't want these bars, the bar rest. So I'm going to choose all of these. I'm going to go to Edit, Remove Rests. It's going to remove all the rests. Now this one doesn't have anything in it anymore, so we have a bit of a problem. So maybe Remove Rests isn't the best option here, but if you've got chord symbols, you'll be fine. And we did have chord symbols because that's what we said we were doing. So let's put one of these in.
if you have a problem with the remove rests and you need to know, let me know. But if we're just doing this for where we've got chord symbols, you can take these chord symbols in engrave mode, you can put them in the bar. I generally find it's only particular sections that you want to do this for. I also, to be honest, I'd often leave them with slashes. I mean, a common, possibly more clear option, personally, I mean, this is where, you know, any of the jazz stuff, you know, it's all personal opinion as to, you know, or what you're following. I would tend to use slashes. I would maybe use a slash voice even. We haven't looked at slash voices today. So when you are entering music, if you press Shift V, normally you can add voices. And there's also an option in the right menu for this, so you can create voices. So there's create voice, but there's also create slash voice. So you can see there's a shortcut option here for it. So use that one. It's be slightly different again on Mac and PC because of Alt. But if you choose that and create a slash voice, then when you're entering the rhythms, and it doesn't actually matter which pitch you use, but now you get a slash voice, so now it's often clearer where the chords are going to actually be. But if you really need them in the staff, then I would probably just in engrave mode drag them into the staff, put them where you want them. I doubt you want that for the whole piece, but you could select all of the chord symbols and move them all down, and they would also do that. It's probably the quickest option at the moment. Somebody asked, oh no, we answered how to input the copyright symbols. A couple of options there for Mac and PC. Yeah, I think it's Alt G, isn't it, on Mac? Yeah, and Option C. Where did we get to? Yeah, I think. So the next session we're going to look at is going to be on some guitar techniques. So I guess we'll be doing some bends and some different options of those, and we'll be doing guitar tab, and we'll be doing capos and things like that, and maybe related to some of the things in this session as well. If you have any examples of how do I do this, please, for guitar and tab, then please email me, also discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and let me know what you would like to know in the next session, which is in about 3 weeks' time. Beginning of December? I'm not sure what the date is, but in the next session. It will be linked in YouTube on the right-hand side, probably, for the next session. And don't forget, like this video, please, if you liked it. But also subscribe to our channel. So click on the bell icon. Click on the subscribe. Click on the bell icon. You'll be notified of the next sessions. And we put these together all in these Dorico 5 live stream options. So you'll be able to find all of the videos in there as well and come back and watch them whenever you need to. So we'll definitely have to watch again. There was a lot of information today. I'm sorry. I was trying to structure it in a way that makes sense. I will now put the descriptions underneath so you can flick back to various bits. So I'll try and put some sensible markers in those. Yeah, you can go back and let me know. The email is discoverdorico. So all one word, discoverdorico@steinberg.de. And I can't see any other questions coming up for things, but like I said, something wasn't clear. It's my fault. Let me know. Yeah, we can look at it in a future session. So, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed a bit of Misty. Sorry about Quincy Jones. Yeah, it's a real shame that. But let's make some really good music and arrangements now, and use Dorico for doing that. So, yeah. Let me know, like I said, if there's anything else that's come up from the end of this. I can see there's not sure what that was a reference to. Yeah. So yes, I will. I'll be on the email and let me know. So the next session, guitars. Let me know what you'd like to look at. Is it tab? It's not an area of my expertise. I'm a saxophone player. But yeah, let me know what you would like to know for being able to create things in Dorico, and we'll do that in the next section. Right, thank you very much. I will see you next time.